Friedrich Nietzsche, Chapter 9. The response to Nietzsche's work during his life was so weak and sporadic that he had to finance some of his later publications. But already during his last conscious years, and even more in the decade following 1890 to 1900, his reputation spread fairly rapidly. The Danish literary critic George Brandes, a Jew who had also helped to revive the memory of the almost forgotten Kierkegaard, claims the merit of having established the philosopher's literary reputation. A growing school of German and French authors began to write articles and books about him. When one reads the subtitles of some of his books, one has to admit that Nietzsche's predictions about his future mission contained more truth than good taste. Europe quickly bestowed upon him the rank of one of mankind's leading thinkers and destroyers. His pessimistic disbelief in mankind's ability to understand his message and his compensatory pride had been expressed in the subtitles and comments. He had called Thus Spoke Zarathustra, quote, a book for everybody and nobody, close quote. Of his Antichrist, he had said, quote, this book belongs to the very few. Perhaps no one of them is alive yet, close quote. It was a book for, quote, predestined readers, close quote. Ecce Homo, that solitary confessional monologue of which he said, quote, and thus I recount my life to myself, close quote, became the object of research and a weird human interest. The thoughts put down in the will to power were to be, quote, the next 2 centuries' history, close quote. The dawn of idols he had called, quote, a small piece of a big declaration of war, close quote. It was always the few, the unknown, or those yet to come, whom he wanted to address. The rest was, quote, nothing but humanity, close quote, deserving to be ignored or despised. These few were soon to increase by leaps and bounds, a fact that does not necessarily mean that Nietzsche was always interpreted in the manner he had desired. Europe's spiritual crisis before World War I is hardly better illustrated than by this rapidly spreading Nietzsche cult. His uncanny philosophical insight paved the way for modern psychoanalysts as much as Dostoevsky's contributions had done. His denunciation of church, religion, and morality intensified the existing crisis of faith, especially in Germany. The deposition of God is a secret deed committed in the darkness of man's mind and always succeeded by the enthronement of a new God. Nietzsche's open proclamation that God had died stirred thousands who, from guilt or doubt, had remained silent about their unbelief and were now to find a new idol in the Superman of varying interpretations. Darwinism, liberalism, higher criticism, and the movement of socialistic freethinkers had been feeding their several varieties of skepticism or atheism into this cauldron of rebellion. Nietzsche's political vagaries fascinated the gentle anarchists as well as the nihilists, pan-Germanistic dreamers as well as the socialists who were eagerly looking for signs of decomposition or sterility in the ruling classes, and the intelligentsia who were just beginning to get tired of Ibsen. The lonely philosopher's dream satisfied the romantic notions of those who wanted to live in a pseudo-mystical aristocracy, a sentimental present in unanchored idealists, in youth, and even among pessimists who regarded the rest of humanity as incurably corrupt. The un-German elegance of his style and the daring brilliance of his imagery held an enormous artistic appeal also for the French intellectuals. Nietzsche aroused the enthusiasm of the libertine D'Annunzio in Italy and found apostles in England, where even George Bernard Shaw flirted for a time with his mental excesses. The lack of success during his own life was a strong factor in raising him quickly to the pedestal of martyrdom and prophecy for the many in German and European society who had suffered from grievances and who, like him, had remained frustrated or unassimilated. The fin de Sechel, mood of Sekle, mood of the 90s, ignored the calendar and lived on side by side with aggressive German imperialism. Thousands were longing for a teacher of the abundant life and the new seer. His universalism allowed anyone of this strange company to find in his message either a complete gospel for the future or at least some nuggets of brilliant insight that were to become priceless treasures in the midst of confusion or spiritual poverty. Nietzsche articulated the hidden sentiments of academic youth more boldly than any other contemporary. He became a cult. His immediate influence upon German political thought before the First World War was negligible. German tradition supplied an abundance of historians, philosophers, and poets to inspire militarism and nationalism. It was a moot point anyway, whether he had preached aggression and physical delight in destruction or an aristocratic spiritual detachment unsoiled by the realities of concrete political issues. This discussion occupied even British publicists, and both sides had ample and contradictory material from Nietzsche's writings to support their positions. The growth of Nazism shortly before and after Hitler's advent to power, 1933, changed this picture. Hitler visited Weimar Nietzsche archives several times, and Elizabeth Nietzsche's sister congratulated Mussolini on the occasion of his 50th birthday for being the, quote, noblest disciple of Zarathustra, close quote. Nietzsche was made to serve the ideology of National Socialism, and an extensive popular literature grew quickly that added the philosopher to the long line of spiritual ancestors of the new political faith. Much of Nietzsche's contribution to the growth of National Socialism was made through the intellectual thievery and compulsory enlistment characteristic of Hitler's followers. Other phases of his writing seem to have fallen naturally into the Nazi pattern. With Dostoevsky, he shares the fate of having contributed to revolutionary mass movements of the greatest importance for history.